The AP Top 25. That's why you guys are here, and that's what we're covering in today's video. If you are new to Utility Sports, make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe. Let's not waste too much time here, Austin. Let's jump right into it. And we're going to go through the top 25, but I do want to talk about one other team in here as well. Randy Moss's alma mater, Marshall, at 85 votes. We also see Cincinnati as well at 80. Two teams to watch, and Appalachian State. We're going to talk about them in just a second as well. And let's start here with Oregon. Number 25, you see that they beat Eastern Washington 70-14, a big bounce back week for them as they fell out of the rankings last week after what was a disastrous loss to Georgia. Find themselves back in the top 25 like we had presumed would happen at some point this year. Then at 24, Texas A&M. And I think these two teams are really two good starting points for us. They dropped 18 spots after a disastrous loss to Appalachian State, who, again, we see them now basically in what would be number 28 on this ranking if there went up to number 28. Austin, I want to know, does Oregon deserve to be back in the top 25 after the whooping they received from Georgia? And did they get it right here with Texas A&M still in the top 25?
Yeah, Texas A&M, what a disastrous loss. I think what keeps them in here is the overall talent of the roster they're banking on. You know, they don't want to get too low on this team. It's a Jimbo Fisher-led program. They have phenomenal recruiting talent over the last couple of seasons, so the roster's there. Now, it is inexcusable them losing to Appalachian State. Despite them being on the road, they should have, I'm sure they were absolute, heavy favorites in that one. No one really saw this coming. It was one of the biggest shocks of the weekend. But there was no other big shock other than, you look at Marshall University pulling off the huge upset win over Notre Dame. How is that going to affect Notre Dame? I'm excited to see this all unveil in front of us. Oregon picking up the big, statement win over Eastern Washington. Once again, that's not a game I'm going to really, focus in on. Oregon is a program that has been strong, but the Pac-12 has been struggling as a whole, over the last couple of weeks. But I kind of look at some of these other teams here. Notre Dame dropping out completely is something that's very noteworthy. I think when you look at where they're at, this program, Marcus Freeman is 0-3 in his start at Notre Dame, the one bowl loss, and then now 2 games to start the season. I think holistically speaking, Notre Dame's in some big trouble, and they better figure it out quick. With the loss of Brian Kelly, that definitely has changed this program.
Right. An 0-2 start for Notre Dame. Not a lot of people saw that coming, a tough loss in week 1 to Ohio State, but coming back, I think a lot of people expected Marshall to be a walkover game for them. And it ended up playing out completely differently. As we move up the rankings here now past 24, we get into 23 here with Pittsburgh, 22 with Penn State, 21 with Texas, at 20 Ole Miss, and at 19 we have Wake Forest, who had a 20-point win over Vanderbilt. Of course, Ole Miss handled their business, 56-point win against Central Arkansas. Not a lot to highlight from that game, I feel like, despite the fact that they are, again, rolling despite the departure of Matt Corral to the NFL. And now the one that's interesting here, Texas moves up in the rankings, or stays at 21, after a loss, but it was a really great competitive game. Lost with about 7 seconds left in that one to a game-winning field goal to Alabama. And at one point, you thought Texas maybe had that game won. They sent a cornerback blitz, and their boundary corner got in on Bryce Young, just didn't make a play, and that was maybe the turning point in that one, Austin. How big of a game was that, though, for Texas in terms of proving its legitimacy, even with a Quinn Ewers injury?
Exactly. And I was just going to highlight that immediately. The Quinn Ewers injury is a big deal, in my opinion. The fact that they were able to stay competitive in that game. I also think that part of it was, Alabama was just coming off of a huge Utah State win, not a super competitive team, but they, go into a tough environment, play Texas. And I think Texas proved a lot of people wrong in terms of, how talented they are. So impressive. Okay, you never want to get into impressive losses, but I mean, they were more competitive than people were giving them credit for. And like you said, the pivot point in that game was the cornerback blitz where Bryce Young evaded it, picked up a ton of yards on the ground after that, and then really ended up in the demise of that team. But another game I do want to highlight here, Wake Forest here at number 19, Sam Hartman had 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 picks. Sam Hartman is legit. And we have talked about him and his importance of this program all of last year. Once again, that carries over to this season. Wake Forest looking very good, beating an SEC opponent there. Granted, it is Vanderbilt, but they took care of business in a 20-point win. So overall, very, very impressive.
Yeah, we see a wide variety here of conferences represented from 24 to 19. We got the ACC, SEC, Big 12, Big 10. And as we jump up to number 18, we have another SEC school here in Florida at 17, Baylor from the Big 12, despite a loss to BYU, who we highlighted that game last week during our AP Top 25 poll, where we were talking about, hey, this matchup's a big one this week. Maybe Baylor could solidify themselves as a near top 5 team, or BYU could really push that program forward. And Austin, we saw it. BYU got the win. North Carolina State rolls over Charleston Southern, and Tennessee gets a big win over Pitt, moves up 9 spots as well. So I think this 18 to 15 range is really critical. Highlight some of your key points here.
Yeah, looking at the Baylor one more specifically, I mean, BYU could not get the ball moving on the ground. I don't even think they had a guy over 35 rush yards in that game. But looking at what they were able to do through the air and attack this secondary of Baylor, that was impressive. Very, very impressive how, BYU has started the season. A little disappointing for, the Big 12 champions in Baylor. But once again, I expect them to bounce back. I think this is a good, tough, competitive football team. Tennessee, a huge, huge win against Pittsburgh. And I think Tennessee all of a sudden was that team that people, they weren't really expecting them to make this kind of jump all the way to 15, but wow, 9 spots. I think the AP is, kind of banking on Tennessee being legit. Florida, man, I mean, what a wild sequence for them, beating Utah week 1 and then losing to Kentucky. And that shot them from, being completely out to all of a sudden 12 in the rankings to now 18. They're all over the place. We don't really know what Florida is at this point.
Right. We're going to talk about them a little bit further on as we move up this ranking, because Kentucky, we're not done talking about them yet in this video either. And as we slide up to number 14 here, as we go up, we got Utah here, who bounced back in a big way with the 66-point win over Southern Utah, definitely dominating the state matchup there. Miami as well with a with a win, against Southern Miss, 30-7. You also see BYU with a win over Baylor. That's that 26-20 game we were just highlighting. And then Michigan State shuts out Akron in what was a pretty big game on the road for them. Definitely asserting their dominance in that matchup. Austin, I think the big one here, again, BYU, we talked about that. They played very well in that matchup overall and moved up 9 spots because of it. Do you think, based on how early these rankings are in the season, that the AP Top 25 has these, 14 to 11 seeds kind of right at this point based on what we've seen?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a ton more changes. I think it's very possible. It's so volatile those first couple of weeks because you get overreactions, especially from week 1. And it's hard during the offseason to pinpoint exactly who should be where. And Utah was a great point in that, with them being ranked so high and then, bumping all the way down to 14 here now. Yeah, I mean, despite them getting a 73-7 win, it's just crazy, how these rankings shake out. Miami getting a big win against Southern Miss. That game, they should have been a little better than they were. They weren't super crisp. I know they won that game 30-7, but once again, I think Miami needs to be a little bit sharper there. Van Dyke had some throws that were definitely concerning, but they were able to run the ball effectively on the ground. And then once again, Michigan State just highlighting them quick. Mel Tucker's team off to a 2-0 start and absolutely, beat the crap out of an Akron team that's not good in any capacity. But that's kind of what I'm seeing from these.
Let's jump further into the top 10 now. And this is the big money programs here. This is where we're really talking about the teams that have a legitimate shot at making the college football playoffs at this given point in time. Obviously, a lot can change. You never really know. But right now, these are the front runners. Arkansas 2-0 with a 14-point win over South Carolina. Kentucky, they're the ones who really made a huge jump here. Up 11 spots, as you can see, after their win over Florida. Of course, Florida was coming off that week 1 high, like you talked about, with AR-15 playing so well at the QB spot. And Kentucky kind of just, took control of that game and really took control of their destiny at this point at number 9 in the rankings. If they continue to win, it's going to be a tough bid against them, but they're going to have some big matchups coming up. Oklahoma State at 8 with another win over Arizona State. USC, another good win there. I know you like what they've got brewing there in Southern California. And then Oklahoma, those two schools just can't seem to get away from each other. Of course, some moving parts from Oklahoma going to USC. Austin, what do you make here of 10-6?
Yeah, so this is honestly where we could see a lot of pivots the next couple of weeks as well. I mean, Arkansas getting a big win over Spencer Rattler's Gamecocks here. Number 9, Kentucky is a huge beneficiary of Florida getting ranked so highly because of that Utah win, therefore creating kind of a domino effect that it gave that win a pretty signature look to it. Obviously, I think that changes a lot of things. I think if Florida doesn't get that first win, I don't even know if they're even close to this number 9 ranking. So that's why each week matters for the rankings, especially that initial week that kind of sets up the whole rest of the season in terms of where people mentally already have them. Oklahoma State, huge win against Arizona State. Spencer Sanders, once again, this guy is legit finally this season. I've had my criticisms of him, but I think this season he's showing that he can be a big time college quarterback, and he's going to help carry this team potentially to a Big 12 championship. But who's standing in their way? It's Oklahoma. Oklahoma, despite losing, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, that was a big deal. Lost some of the staff members, but Oklahoma continues to keep rolling. This is a team, once again, that is legit. Big win over Kent State. Once again, that's not super relevant at this point. Once we start picking up in some conference play, that's when things are really going to get interesting. And then USC over Stanford, another Pac-12 rival. No problem there. USC is just continuing to roll. We knew this was going to happen with Lincoln Riley. Most times it takes guys a couple of years to build up a program, but it's almost kind of instantaneous when you have the transfer portal and the ability to pull top end talent right away instead of going through the whole recruiting process, waiting for those freshmen that you recruit to mature and turn into strong sophomores and juniors. At this point, the transfer portal has completely changed the game, in my opinion.
Right. It definitely has, bring in one of the best receivers in the entire nation and one of the better QBs in the nation definitely doesn't hurt there. And you see the benefits of that at the number 7 ranking right now for USC. And then we get into the top 5 and we got Clemson in here, who, again, they just belong up here. We talked about that a lot last week. We also have Michigan here at 2-0 with a huge win over Hawaii. 2 blowout games here in 5-4. Anything you really want to know between these two programs?
Yeah, nice bounce back this season for Clemson so far. People are starting to give some respect in the rankings. Dabo Swinney's a terrific coach. Once again, I want to see Clemson to continue to, we need a true statement win. I think to kind of solidify where they're at here. Once again, Michigan, dominant win over Hawaii. Nothing too noteworthy, nor am I shocked at any of this at this point. I think this kind of follows, path of where it should be.
Right. These schools go into, games against Hawaii, Furman. If they don't get it done, we're looking at a Notre Dame situation where they fall out of the rankings. But obviously they went and took care of business and they move on to week 3 with a perfect record. And as we go up into the top 3 now, this is where it gets very interesting. There's going to be a lot of debate here. Ohio State 2-0, dominant win over Arkansas State. Remember, they had the big win over Notre Dame in week 1, which maybe isn't looking as illustrious as it was at the point after Notre Dame's loss this week. But at the time, it was looked at very positively. Alabama drops down 1 spot to the number 2 seed after their very narrow win of 1 point against Texas. And then Georgia just does what Georgia does, go into a road game against a team that's inferior to them, shut them out, and just dominate every single facet of that game with a 33-point win. Austin, last week you were calling for the AP Top 25 to put Georgia number 1. This week they finally do. What do you like about this top 3?
Well, I think this is perfectly set. I think Alabama is so good. They deserve to be number 2, but I just feel like Georgia's got another gear, especially defensively. Once again, despite all of those draft picks, these guys up front are absolute dogs. I mean, they are able to stuff the run. They're able to rush the passer. They got guys on the back end that are terrific. Alabama, once again, same thing. When you look at Will Anderson being an absolute monster along that defensive line, Ohio State is a team that is just so potent offensively that they can do a lot of damage. We see Marvin Harrison Jr. absolutely dominate that game, considering it was against Arkansas State, but nevertheless, he went out, he dominated, and that's what you're supposed to do against teams that, once again, are inferior. Like Georgia got it done against Samford. Ohio State got it done against Arkansas State. And then Alabama, this might be a whole nother conversation if that corner is able to wrap up on that corner blitz. I mean, Alabama's tough to beat, and I think they were just off a little bit in that Texas game.
Yeah, they just barely pulled that one out. Of course, you can't knock them for getting the win, but it was a lot closer than I think a lot of people were even expecting, including Texas fans probably going into the week. But one thing I want to highlight here, the top 3 teams all have something in common, and that's great coaches. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, and also Ryan Day there. There's a reason these programs are at the top. The decision makers there, the recruiters, the coaching decisions are all typically phenomenal, which is why we see these programs toward the top every single week, bring in a ton of talent, and they coach the kids up. And they do a great job at it. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. It's a lot of fun recording the AP Top 25. If you want more content like this, we will be recording this every single week for you. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and also leave a like for more in the future. Thanks guys so much for watching. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.